The year was 1879. The wind rolled low over the prairie like a hush before a prayer, warm and dry, brushing past a line of cottonwoods that trembled, as if they too were afraid to speak. A woman stood at the rusted ranch gate, holding her son's hand. Her bonnet shadowed most of her face, but not the way her eyes searched the land ahead, as if trying to find her place in it. The boy, no more than 4, clutched a cloth rabbit patched and repatched, his chin lifted like he'd promised his mother not to cry, though dust itched at his lashes. Edward didn't dismount when he saw her. He stayed atop his gray mare, towering, sunburnt, every inch of him carved from the earth he worked. His jaw clenched once, twice. Then he spoke low. "You're here to cook for my mother. That's all." His voice, rough and cracked like an unused trail, didn't meet her with welcome, only instruction. He nodded toward the porch and didn't wait to see if she followed. The boy blinked up at the woman. She gave him a silent nod. Together, they passed through the gate, boots whispering against dry grass and forgotten gravel. Inside, the ranch house was plain but sound, its beams thick, floor swept clean, the smell of wood smoke lingering. Eliza Wilde glanced around as if stepping into someone else's memory. Her fingers brushed the table's edge as if to prove it was real. No one offered to take her sack or the boy's thin blanket. The mother, Martha Boone, sat near the window, her body stiff in the wheelchair, jaw slack from paralysis, eyes sharp as a hawk's. Eliza moved to her with a gentleness unspoken, knelt, and introduced herself as if offering a secret. She didn't reach for the woman's hand. She waited, watching for permission in the flick of an eyelash. Cyrus had already disappeared into the barn. That evening, Eliza cooked. The pots were mismatched and dented, but she wiped them clean with cloth and care. She made cornbread from memory, added wild mint to beans, and roasted potatoes with cracked pepper she'd brought in her apron. She laid the table in silence. Cyrus didn't speak when he sat, just ate, slow and methodical. When Toby reached for a biscuit, Eliza's hand gently covered his. She hadn't been told if the boy was allowed to eat with them. "He can have one," Cyrus muttered, never looking up. Eliza broke the biscuit in two, giving half to Toby and saving the rest for Martha's tray. When she delivered it to the old woman, she whispered, "Only if you're hungry, ma'am." And though the woman could not answer, her gaze lingered on Eliza's face longer than expected. Eliza tucked the tray in and stepped back. That night, in the storage room they were given, Eliza lay beside her son on a cot of straw. She pressed her lips to his hair and whispered promises she didn't yet know how to keep. Outside, crickets sang beneath a wide, indifferent moon. By midweek, the town had taken notice. Delilah Crowley said it first, pouring sugar in her coffee like it was gossip itself. "Boone's got a woman now. Widow. Heard she's real pretty in the right light." Seth Granger laughed. "A cook, you mean? He hired her. You know Cyrus. He don't keep company. But whispers have long legs." They climbed fences and traveled down fence posts and through the wind. By Friday, Eliza couldn't step into the general store without feeling eyes like hooks. When she handed over her cents for salt and flour, the clerk said nothing, but didn't offer her a smile. Back home, the days were heavy with unspoken things. Cyrus was not cruel, only cold. He ate every meal she prepared, but never praised her hands. He passed by her on the stairs, boots heavy, without so much as a nod. But Eliza noticed the small things, the way he refilled the firewood without being asked, or left a dry towel on the porch rail when she bathed Toby in the basin. She noticed, too, that he always lingered near the window where his mother sat after breakfast, just far enough away not to show he was watching. Martha began to respond to Eliza's touch. When Eliza read softly from a battered Bible, the woman's fingers twitched. When Eliza pinned her shawl, just so, Martha blinked twice, approval or something like it. It was not affection, but it was a bridge. On the 6th evening, thunder rolled across the horizon. Toby cried in his sleep, curled up with fists at his mouth. Eliza rose without sound, took him to the hearth, and knelt. The fire had gone low. She pulled him close, placed his palm over her heart, and whispered, "Right here. Right here." The storm raged outside. Inside, only the crackle of cooling embers and the whisper of a lullaby in a voice hoarse with grace. What she didn't know was that Cyrus stood in the shadows of the hall, watching, his shoulders heavy, his arms crossed like a man defending something he didn't know how to hold. He turned before she saw him. His footsteps disappeared into the dark. The next morning, the kitchen smelled of peaches. Eliza had found the old tree behind the barn, picked what she could reach, and baked them into hot biscuits with brown butter. She served Martha first, then Cyrus. He bit in without a word, but halfway through he paused. She smiled. Eliza looked up from where she was drying her hands. Martha. She smiled this morning. He didn't meet her eyes. Been a year since she did that. Eliza said nothing, only nodded, but something rose in her chest like warmth from the stove. That afternoon, in town, things worsened. Delilah Crowley waited by the church stoop with a basket of stale bread for the poor and poison for the heart. As Eliza passed with Toby, the woman sneered. "Cookin' for the widower now, are you? Or hopin' he forgets what your last name was?" Eliza didn't answer. She only lowered her head. Toby squeezed her hand tighter. Later that day, she knelt in the garden behind the ranch, pulling weeds with red fingertips. The sun made halos on the back of her neck. She wiped sweat from her brow and kept going. Inside the window, Martha watched her. That evening, the old woman reached for Eliza's hand and squeezed it weakly. It made Eliza cry. Not loud, not with sound, just the kind of tears that fall in secret when no one is meant to see them. On the seventh night, the sky turned violet. Cyrus came in from the barn without his usual scowl. His hands were stained with leather oil. He carried a small book. This was my wife's. He laid it on the table without fanfare. Cookbook. Maybe you can use it better. Eliza looked at it, then at him. The cover was worn, pages curled at the corners, a ribbon still tucked into the middle. She reached out, fingertips grazing it like it was sacred. "Thank you, Mr. Boone." He shook his head, voice quieter this time. "It's Cyrus." She didn't open the book yet. Instead, she held it close, the way you hold something that once meant love to someone else. Cyrus nodded once, turned, and disappeared down the hall. Behind him, her son sat quietly beside the hearth, the cloth rabbit in his arms. The fire flickered, and for the first time, the house did not feel borrowed. It felt almost like the beginning of something else. And far down the hallway, in the stillness of her room, Martha Boone smiled again, this time without needing peaches. The mornings came gentler now. Early summer stitched warmth into the wind, and the ranch began to smell less like labor and more like bread, sweet hay, and lemon balm. Light broke over the porch each day with quiet Eliza, and for the first time in many years, it didn't feel like a house made only for grief. Eliza hummed softly in the kitchen as Toby played with wooden blocks nearby. The boy no longer whispered when he laughed. The fear in his little bones had begun to melt, the way frost melts beneath a kindly sun. Cyrus noticed this not with words, but in the way he paused in the doorway, boots muddy, gaze long. He stood there longer each time, watching the table get set, watching his mother nap with a blanket tucked under her chin, watching Eliza reach across the table to fix the hem of her son's sleeve as though it were sacred. That morning, he brought back something wrapped in brown paper. It wasn't large, but he looked uncomfortable carrying it, as if it were too delicate for his hands. He placed it on the table, not meeting her eyes. "Sun's mean out there," he said. "Thought you might want one that ain't falling apart." She opened the paper slowly and found a new bonnet inside, simple, ivory, with blue stitching along the brim. She held it with both hands, blinking once, as though someone had just told her she was still visible in the world. "Thank you, Cyrus," she whispered. He nodded, then left again. But gestures are louder than voices. At church the next Sunday, Eliza wore the bonnet. She'd ironed her dress with steam from the kettle and wiped Toby's boots with old soap and cloth. They rode in the wagon beside Martha, who leaned against pillows and watched the road as if remembering how it once felt to ride proud and strong. Cyrus rode behind them on horseback, quiet, his shadow longer than any sermon. They arrived late. The congregation turned. Whispers moved like wind through pine. Delilah Crowley, clutching her fan, leaned toward Seth Granger and didn't bother lowering her voice. That widow walks too tall for someone hired to stir beans. She's got his mother on a leash now. You'll see. One day she'll answer the door in his shirt, Seth said with a sneer. Eliza didn't flinch, but she lowered her gaze, took Toby's hand tighter, and walked forward down the aisle with quiet dignity. She helped Martha into place and didn't sit beside her. She stood in the back. After service, Cyrus stepped toward her, jaw set. His voice was quiet but cold. I told you not to let them see they got to you. Eliza shook her head, not with defiance, but a weariness that came from years of swallowing shame. I'm used to being stared at. I just hoped Toby wouldn't be. That night, she cooked with rosemary and wild onion. The table was quiet until Cyrus set down his fork, pushed back his chair, and stood. You'll eat with us from now on. She looked up, unsure if she'd heard him right. He didn't repeat himself. He just walked out. The next day, when Seth Granger rode up to the fence, chewing a twig like he owned the land, Cyrus was waiting. Eliza watched from the porch, her heart tucked tight beneath her ribs. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the twitch in Cyrus's jaw, the way he stepped forward, blocking the view of the house behind him. Seth rode away, with less noise than he came. That evening, Cyrus returned with dust on his coat and something deeper in his silence. At supper, he reached for Toby's cup and refilled it. Then he passed Eliza the salt. When she took it, their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. The days thickened with meaning. Martha began speaking again, short words at first, then full sentences spoken mostly to Eliza. She called her child, and once, just once, she reached out to brush a lock of hair from Eliza's face. Eliza smiled with tears she didn't shed. By late June, the ranch pulsed with something unspoken. The garden was blooming, and so was something between them, something that didn't need naming to be real. Eliza began placing a sprig of sage on Cyrus's napkin at dinner. He began fixing the loose boards on her room's window without being asked. She began ironing his shirts. He began standing beside her at the sink after supper, not helping, just standing. Then came the fire, not of a house, but of words, of gossip. Delilah saw Eliza buying sugar and asked in front of 5 others, "So when's the wedding, dear? Or is it just the apron he likes you in?" Eliza said nothing, but Cyrus heard about it by the time the sun set. He was told she didn't speak a word in reply, only left the store with her boy, holding her chin like it weighed 1,000 stones. That night, he rode into town not saying why. The saloon dimmed as he stepped inside. Seth was there. So was Delilah. So were 6 men who had nothing but opinions and whiskey in their bellies. Edward didn't raise his voice. He didn't draw his weapon. He said one thing: "The woman I hired has done more for my mother, and for me, than any of you ever did. She brings peace into my home, which I thought I'd buried with my wife. And if any of you say her name again without respect, I'll make sure you remember the sound of your own bones breaking. And then, she deserves a name that ain't whispered. I'm giving her mine." The room fell quiet. The piano player stopped playing. Someone dropped a glass. And with that, Cyrus left. The only sound that followed him was the wind. Back at the ranch, Eliza was folding linen when he returned. She looked up, startled. "You all right?" He removed his hat, set it gently on the table, and nodded. "I went into town." "I heard," she said softly. He stepped closer. The fire behind her flickered gold onto his chest. He looked down at his hands, then at her. "I didn't mean to fall for you," he said. "Didn't plan to. But your eyes healed more than just my mother." Eliza held still. The silence was holy. Only the pop of wood breaking into flame filled the space between them. "I've never belonged anywhere, Cyrus," she whispered, barely able to breathe the truth aloud. "And folks like me, we don't get picked. We get passed." He stepped forward, lifted her hand, pressed it against his chest. "You're not passed anymore." Outside, the horses stirred, and the night air held its breath. They married under the cottonwood tree 2 days later. No church bells. Just the sound of Toby laughing in his new boots and Martha saying, "My boy's finally home." Eliza wore blue, the same as the stitching on the bonnet. Cyrus wore a clean shirt and eyes that held steady. When he said his vows, he added a line of his own. This ain't just marriage. It's redemption. Toby handed him a small wildflower bouquet with trembling hands, and Cyrus knelt beside him. This ain't just your mama now, he said, voice shaking. It's your home. Eliza cried then, not because she was afraid, but because she'd never imagined being chosen in daylight. The sky burned gold as they shared their first kiss beneath branches that bent like blessings. Later that night, the narrator's voice returns like wind through tall grass. Some hearts are built like doors, closed for so long they forget how to open. But sometimes it only takes a quiet knock, a child's laughter, or a hand steady enough to light the stove each morning. If you've ever been told you're not enough, or only good for one thing, remember her. Eliza, hired to cook, but loved for everything else. And in the soft hush of that prairie night, even the stars seemed to listen.